Nothing in this podcast or on our website should be construed as medical advice. Consult your healthcare provider for your individual nutritional and medical needs. The information presented is based on our research and is strictly that of the author and not necessarily those of any professional group or other individual.
Hi, I'm Sue Becker from Bread Beckers. Welcome to Sue's Healthy Minutes. I'm so excited you've joined me today, and I hope this episode encourages you and allows you to find the answers you have been praying for the health of you and your family. I am often asked what type of wheat to use in particular baking recipes. My general answer is hard wheat for yeast breads and soft wheat for non-yeast or quick breads. But there can actually be a little more to your choice of grain to best suit your recipe and to give you the most pleasing end results. So today I thought I would give a short wheat and flour tutorial to help you know what flour or what wheat might be best to use in your next baking adventure. Wheat is by far the most popular flour used in baking, so it's important to know the basic classifications of wheat, as well as those for commercially processed refined flour, and the different baking qualities of each. While I'm in no way suggesting that you use commercially processed white flour, this information should help you determine the best type of wheat and flour to choose when substituting freshly milled flour for the refined white flour called for in a recipe. So let's get started. We'll start with wheat. Wheat has 6 basic classifications based on its protein content, making it either hard or soft, its growing season, whether it's winter or spring, and its variety or color, which is red or white. These 6 classifications, hard, soft, winter, spring, red, white, determine the character of the flour and how it will perform in any given recipe. The hardness. The hardness of a wheat kernel is determined in part by its moisture content, which in turn affects its protein content. Hard wheat is a low moisture, high protein wheat that grows best in cold, dry climates. To be classified as hard wheat, the protein content must range from 10 to 14%. The high protein content of hard wheat is important when making yeast bread as it ensures proper gluten formation. Gluten is nothing more than the stretchy strands of protein that form when wheat flour is hydrated. These stretchy strands of gluten trap the carbon dioxide gas produced by the yeast during the fermentation of the dough, allowing the bread to rise. These gluten-forming proteins are unique to the wheat family of grains and have always been there, which is why wheat has been the king of bread making since the beginning of time. The high protein content of hard wheat, allowing the development of a strong gluten structure, is critical to achieving a good rise when making yeast breads. Soft wheat, on the other hand, is a high moisture, low protein wheat. It grows well in warmer climates with a good bit of rainfall during the growing season. Soft wheat does not have the protein content to support adequate gluten formation. Therefore, soft wheat is not typically recommended for yeast breads. Soft wheat is often referred to as pastry flour or cake flour and is best used for cakes, cookies, biscuits, pastries, pie dough, and what is often called quick breads that use baking powder or baking soda as the leavening. Due to the greater rainfall and warm spring and summers during the growing season, the southern states of America can only grow soft wheat. Corn also grows well in the South, which might explain our cultural preference for biscuits and cornbread over yeast breads. And years ago, just about every Southern grandmother was known for her special cake or pie. I know my grandmother was. The next classification of wheat is determined by the growing season. Wheat is planted during two distinct seasons. Winter wheat is grown where winters are a bit milder. It is sown in the fall, grows over the winter, and is harvested in the spring or early summer. Spring wheat, on the other hand, is grown in colder climates, primarily Canada and the northern plains of the United States. It is sown in the spring and harvested in the late summer or early fall. Hard wheat can be either winter or spring. At Beckers, our hard wheat is spring wheat. Now we come to different varieties of wheat. There's red wheat and white wheat. White wheat is a relatively newer variety of wheat in comparison to red. Red wheat has a darker colored bran and a nuttier, rich flavor than white wheat. White wheat is very mild and bland in flavor and much lighter in color. Red wheat seems to have a little higher fiber content than white wheat, and I personally love the rich flavor of red wheat for most of my yeast bread, or a combination of red and white wheat. Usually, I use 2 parts red wheat to 1 part white wheat. But for breads where I want the flavor of the seasoning or toppings to shine, such as pizza dough or garlic rolls, I might choose to use only white wheat. I use my basic bread dough recipe for most all of my yeast breads, simply changing the variety of wheat, red or white or a combination, to suit the taste in the final product that I want. Spelt and kamut are 2 ancient grain varieties of wheat. They are easy to incorporate into most any recipe, whether a yeast bread or a quick bread. Spelt is darker in color and has a sweet, nutty flavor, more similar to red wheat, while kamut is light in both color and flavor, more like white wheat. I love the rich flavor of spelt. Spelt is darker in color and has a sweet, nutty flavor more similar to red wheat, while kamut is light in both color and flavor, more like white wheat. I love the rich flavor of spelt. Spelt flour is considered the best of both worlds, as it is typically classified somewhere between a hard and soft wheat in protein content. It gives an incredibly soft texture to cakes, cookies, muffins, and pancakes, much like soft wheat, but its unique protein content will form adequate gluten structure, so spelt can be used alone when making yeast breads, although I typically prefer to combine it with some hard wheat for better rising results. Yeast bread recipes made using only spelt flour tend to require more flour than when using a hard wheat. For example, in my basic bread dough recipe that calls for 4.5 cups of hard wheat flour, I find that I need as much as 5.5 cups of flour if I'm using 100% freshly milled spelt flour. If you measure by weight, the weight remains the same, as you will find that it takes more spelt flour than hard wheat flour to reach that same weight. Kamut is a trademarked name for another ancient variety of wheat. It is considered the grandfather of durum wheat, which is commonly used for pasta. And kamut does indeed make great pasta. Its protein structure does not lend itself to yeast breads where a tall rise is desired. Like spelt, for yeast bread, kamut is best mixed with hard wheat, either red or white or a combination of all 3. I particularly love mixing equal parts of kamut and hard white wheat in my recipe for French bread. You can find this recipe for my fabulous French bread on page 146 in my Essential Homegrown Flour book. The recipe calls for 5 cups of flour, but I've found with the wheat and kamut available right now, it is best with only 4.5 cups of this flour combination. But it may change depending on where you get your wheat and where you get your kamut. Kamut is delicious used in quick breads such as muffins, pancakes, and coffee cake. The flour is a little more coarse than soft wheat, but the texture and flavor are still very delicious. It is fun experimenting with the different flavor combinations of red and white wheat, as well as spelt and kamut. At Bread Becker's, our hard wheat and soft wheat are available in both white and red varieties. And as mentioned earlier, all of our hard wheat is spring wheat. Our kamut and spelt and soft white wheat are organically grown. We offer the hard red and hard white wheat in both organic and non-organic. And I am happy to say that our soft red wheat is Georgia grown. And all of our wheat is labeled to identify the differences, such as hard red, hard white, soft red, soft white, and is packaged in food grade 6-gallon buckets or 1-gallon pails or 2-pound bags. You can find all of these products on our website, breadbeckers.com, or if you don't live in the area and you don't want to pay exorbitant shipping prices, you might check out some of our co-ops. We have many to choose from. Freshly milled wheat flour has an undeniably sweet flavor and soft texture, unlike the commercially milled whole wheat flour or refined white flour available in grocery stores. There really is no comparison. Freshly milled wheat flour can easily be substituted in any white flour recipe, but choosing the right flour for your specific recipe can be easier if you understand a little bit about the commercially processed white flour classifications. Now, it might seem confusing to you that we will be talking about white flour here, but I think when you understand what type of wheat is used to make each type of refined flour, you will know better which type of wheat might work best in your recipe. And as I mentioned earlier, the weather and rainfall in the area where wheat is grown greatly affects the protein content of that wheat. Not just geographically, but even from year to year and farm to farm, these variations can give quite inconsistent baking results. But in the commercial baking world, inconsistent results are simply not an option. Therefore, when wheat is commercially processed to make flour, not only is the bran and germ and oil stripped away, as I so often discuss, but also the moisture and the protein content of the white flour are controlled using chemical agents and enhancers such as potassium bromate, benzoyl peroxide, and bleaching agents. Potassium bromate is considered a flour improver that strengthens the dough and allows for greater oven spring and higher rising. Benzoyl peroxide is a powdered bleaching agent that is added directly to the flour, while chlorine gas is fed into the bin of commercially milled flour to remove any yellow pigment from those residual oils from the milled grain. All of these agents have varied health risks, and some quite serious. Benzoyl peroxide has been shown to cause severe breathing and skin issues, as well as stomach irritations, especially for those with existing digestive issues. Nitrogen trichloride was used for many years as a bleaching agent, but fortunately was removed from the market as tests showed it caused hysteria and even seizures. But unfortunately, a chlorine derivative is still used today in commercially processed flour. Potassium bromate is not without concerns as well. It is used to strengthen the gluten structure of the flour, but has been shown to cause both liver and thyroid issues. Bread today is being blamed for many health issues, and rightfully so. But hopefully, you are now seeing that it is not the wheat that is the problem, but what is done to the flour when it is commercially processed. It is not enough that the most nutritious portions of the grain, the bran and germ, are stripped away, but harmful chemicals are then used to supposedly enhance the baking qualities of the flour. And unfortunately, Commercially processed whole wheat flour is not much better. It is a dry and gritty flour as the oil is removed and only some of the bran and germ are added back. And this flour, like the white flour, is exposed to the same chemical flour enhancers. These are just a few of the reasons to begin using only freshly milled flour instead of commercially processed flour, and baking all of your own bread and flour products instead of buying those unhealthy, dead bread versions offered on the shelves of our grocery store. Now, besides using these harmful chemical enhancers to improve the consistency of commercially processed flour, commercial flour millers will also combine various flours from hard and soft winter and spring wheat to achieve a flour with a more consistent protein content. This will create a flour that will give consistent baking results when used in specific baking applications. Commercially processed white flour has 4 basic classifications: all-purpose flour, bread flour, pastry or cake flour, and self-rising flour. Understanding these will give you a better understanding of what wheat to use as your freshly milled flour substitution. Again, I want to reiterate that I am in no way suggesting you use commercially processed white flour, but I hope this information will give you a better understanding of the best wheat to choose for your recipe. No matter what the classification of commercially processed white flour, they all have the nutritious bran and germ removed, leaving only the protein and starch, making it virtually devoid of nutritional value. So let's start with commercially milled all-purpose white flour. It is made from a blend of flours from both hard and soft wheat and is intended to be used in a wide range of baking applications. For the average baker, it will give fairly good results in both yeast breads and quick breads. Remember, the bran and germ has been sifted away. Commercially processed white bread flour, also known as strong white flour, is a high-protein flour and, as you would expect, is made completely from hard wheat. Its designation as bread flour is just that. It makes better yeast bread than all-purpose flour. Now, many Southern bakers swear by cake flour, also known as pastry flour, for making their famous cakes and pies. Commercially processed cake flour is made entirely from soft wheat, which, of course, like all-purpose and bread flour, has the fibrous bran and germ removed, leaving only a high-moisture, low-protein white flour. Established bakers know that cake flour won't make great yeast bread, but will work beautifully for their cakes, cookies, biscuits, and pie dough. Before commercially processed flour became available, women everywhere owned a hand-operated sifter so they could sift the bran and germ away from the freshly milled flour to make, in their opinion, lighter, fluffier cakes. But I can tell you this: you can make deliciously soft and flavorful cakes and cookies, biscuits, and pie dough from freshly milled soft wheat flour without sifting away the all too nutritious bran and germ. One last classification of commercially milled flour is self-rising flour. Self-rising flour is a convenience product made by adding the leavenings, baking powder, baking soda, and salt to all-purpose white flour. It is commonly called for in quick breads and biscuit recipes, but generally not recommended for yeast breads. You can easily make your own freshly milled self-rising flour by adding 1 teaspoon of baking powder and a half a teaspoon of both baking soda and salt to 1 1/4 cups of freshly milled soft wheat flour. This mixture can then be substituted for every 1 cup of self-rising white flour. Hopefully, this understanding of what type of wheat is used commercially to make the different commonly processed flours will help you to know which wheat to use in the recipe you want to make, which kind of brings me back full circle to my statement in the beginning. Hard wheat will make better bread flour. So for yeast breads, you want to typically choose hard red or hard white wheat or a combination of the two. For recipes calling for cake or pastry flour, or for cakes, cookies, biscuits, pie dough, and other quick breads that do not use yeast as the leavening, you will probably want to choose freshly milled soft wheat, either red or white, depending on the flavor you want in the finished product. For a pound cake or biscuits, you might prefer soft white wheat, but for a rich oatmeal cookie or a spice cake or muffin, soft red wheat would be my choice. The same for a recipe that calls for self-rising flour. Just choose the soft wheat you want to use and then add the baking powder, baking soda, and salt, as I mentioned earlier, and you've got the perfect freshly milled self-rising flour substitution. Now, some of you may be wondering about baking mixes such as Bisquick. These baking mixes are generally made from all-purpose flour with not only the leavening added, but also the fat. So, to substitute freshly milled flour for a baking mix, just follow the directions for making your own self-rising flour from freshly milled soft wheat, then cut in a 1/4 cup of butter or other fat for every 1 1/4 cup of your freshly milled self-rising flour. Then measure accordingly for your baking mix called for in the recipe. Part of the fun and satisfaction of milling my own grain is being able to choose what grain works best for what I want to make, and the varieties of flavor from choosing different grain flours makes for a more delicious final product. We don't have to settle for unhealthy, flavorless white flour. The possibilities with freshly milled flour are endless, and the flavor delicious, and the health benefits are the icing on the cake, so to speak. You can find all of this information about wheat and the different flours and recipes for making your own self-rising flour and Bisquick from freshly milled flour and more in my book, The Essential Homeground Flour Book. You can order the Essential Homeground Flour Book with free shipping at breadbeckers.com. A link will be provided in the podcast description. I hope you have enjoyed listening and learning today, and that any flour or wheat confusion has been resolved in our wheat and flour tutorial. Until next time, this is Sue Becker from Bread Beckers with Sue's Healthy Minutes.
Sue's Healthy Minutes podcast has been a presentation by the Bread Beckers Incorporated, located in Woodstock, Georgia. For more information, store hours, and learning opportunities, visit breadbeckers.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. Share this with 2 friends who would benefit from this information, and be sure to join us again next week for more of Sue's Healthy Minutes.